You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Akuna Capital. Known as the new wave in tech and trading, Akuna is a leading derivatives market maker in traditional asset classes. As one of the first trading firms to make markets on Bitcoin futures, Akuna is also proud to be an innovator in the cryptocurrency space. Through a collaborative flow of knowledge between developers, quants, and traders, Akuna designs and implements their own low-latency technologies, trading strategies, and mathematical models. To learn more about our rapidly growing firm, please visit akunacapital.com. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we look a little bit beyond our traditional stomping grounds of your VIX and your Apple and Tesla and SPY options and see what's going on out there in the world of crypto. Going to talk, of course, the big ones, the Bitcoins and your ETHs, also the volatility, the volume, the SKEW, the big unusual options activity, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the aforementioned network. Glad so many of you can join us here. Our second program here of the new year, and already a lot going on in the world of crypto to sink our teeth into. And let's see who's joining us today as we kick it off with our first crypto hot seat of the new year.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the program where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto derivatives and indeed beyond, and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listeners. And today's guest is a newcomer to the program and indeed to the network. He is Konstantin ANISSIMOV. He is the executive director at CEX.io. Konstantin, welcome to the Crypto Rundown program.
Hello, Mark. Thank you very much for having me.
And Konstantin, as we are wont to do with all of our first-timers here on the network, why don't you give us an overview of your background in the crypto space, as well as what it is you folks do over there at CEX.io.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Mark. I'll be happy to. So as you've already pointed out, I'm an executive director at CEX.io. I'm on the board of directors at group level of the holding of the company. So I'm responsible for the strategy, growth, and innovation of the business worldwide. And that's one of the reasons why I'm on the show, because I can equally speak. I'm based in the UK, but I can equally speak for what's going on in the US as well, which hopefully will keep it very relevant to your audience. As a company, we are one of the longest running cryptocurrency firms in the world, founded in 2013, and we offer a whole ecosystem of various products, ranging from a retail, various retail offerings, all the way to a prime liquidity institutional offering, and various other kind of more technical services like validator node creation, etc., etc. So it's a breadth of experience and knowledge within the company, I would say.
One thing I do like, if you visit the cex.io website, listeners, you put security front and center. You have a big stat there of 0% customer funds lost, I should say, since you launched, Konstantin. I like that stat. That's a fun one.
Yes, and I think we're quite uniquely placed. It's very easy to make that claim. We've been around for 8 years now. Very much proud of it.
As you should be. We don't need another Mount Gox on our hands out there. Well, of course, a lot of our audience based here in the U.S. here. And for you guys, as you mentioned, the U.S., a bit of a newer initiative. You've been around in the U.K. and in Europe since 2013, but I believe you launched your U.S. foray back in 2019. How's that going for you guys so far, Konstantin?
Oh, it's going great. Well, first of all, it's been a struggle to start with. Because, as you know, the regulatory perimeter in the U.S. is pretty complicated, and there is no federal level regulation. So you have to attack the market state by state. So it's, in essence, it's not one country; it's many different separate states that you have to negotiate with the governments of. And that process takes time and perseverance and quite a bit of capital and investments as well. So right now we can actually operate in all of the states in the U.S. I believe it's all the states apart from New York and one other state, which temporarily we are not yet allowed to operate in. So we've got very, very good coverage. What I'd say is that globally the U.S. has, I would say, either is or has the potential to be the biggest single market in the world for crypto. So for us, it's definitely a very, very important market to grow, develop, and make sure we keep adding new and new services into this market.
I don't think people really appreciate how laborious it is to really launch a crypto trading venue here in the U.S. As you mentioned, unlike with stocks where you really kind of just have to deal with the SEC and whatever exchange you're listing on. With crypto, you have to go all around the country to 50 different regulatory environments, and they may want one completely different standard in Delaware versus New Mexico. So I'd imagine, Konstantin, that has to be a pretty frustrating process to go state by state and see whatever the regulators want in this venue could be completely unrelated to what another one wants.
Well, I think that is just the tip of the iceberg, because once you have those licenses, then you have to upkeep them. You have to do quarterly regulatory reporting. You have to. There's a huge burden and overhead on your operation. But I think it's one of those things that, because this is one of the largest markets in the world, the way I look at it is there's still a lot of commercial interest in any business to do that. It's just not every business can have the regulatory moat is a little bit wide, I would say, in the US. And then it's not for the faint-hearted to endure.
Well, you guys have been navigating those waters for some time, and you're become, I'd imagine, probably experts on the U.S. regulatory scene here. Do you foresee that changing anytime in the near future? Maybe the SEC starting to take a firmer hands on the reins to make it easier for you folks and firms like yours to have to negotiate really with one overarching federal body rather than 50 independent state bodies?
I see that there's a lot of speculation right now, and there's multiple bodies within the US, not just SEC, who are all competing for who should crypto fall into the regulatory remit to. So I think there's interest from multiple regulatory bodies. There's uncertainty within the Senate and the government as well. However, and because of that, I cannot say what will happen and when exactly. However, if you look at what is happening in the European Union with their MiCA regulation, which is an EU-wide regulation, which will bring crypto very close to an EMI or a MiFID II, which essentially will make it somewhere in between a securities exchange or it's hard to explain. I'm just trying to think for the U.S. folks. It's kind of closer to the money transmitter licenses, but at federal level. And I wouldn't be surprised if the U.S. would follow the same trajectory, because that is the only way that you can allow for innovation to accelerate. There's another side to it as well, is when you lean towards the institutional side of things, there's a lot of interest from a whole range of hedge funds, and I'm hearing from hedge funds that even endowment funds and insurance pension funds are changing their investment charters to include digital assets. They're doing it very quietly. I'm not hearing anything in the media, but they clearly are prepping up for the ability to invest in digital assets and crypto. However, that category of customers would only touch crypto if there was clear federal level regulation. So I think there's going to be multiple pressures on the government to formalize something that works, be it from the innovation side or from the market side, retail users, institutional, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, obviously, when you're talking crypto, the big dog from a market cap and from a volume perspective is still Bitcoin across the board. So I'd imagine that's dominating the tape over there on your exchange, Konstantin. But are there any other interesting products that have been popping up on the radar over there at CEX.io of late, Konstantin, that have maybe raised your eyebrows a bit and seem a little interesting?
I don't think I'd be able to say exact names right now, but what I'd say in general is, for me personally, what is interesting is, as you know, Bitcoin doesn't really have support for smart contracts. Ethereum has become the de facto place, the de facto blockchain that supports smart contracts on which you can build very complex and innovative applications like the DeFi, liquidity pools, automated market makers, etc., etc. But we all know the issues with Ethereum is the gas fees and essentially inability for an average investor to even try those instruments because the fees are so high. So what is interesting to me is this whole abundance of L1 blockchain projects that's sprung up in the last 2-3 years. And they used to be startups a year ago. Now they're well-established businesses, and they're becoming very serious competitors to Ethereum. I think time will show as to which one will persevere and become whether any one of those will overturn the leadership of Ethereum or not. And the other one is with Bitcoin. I don't see that becoming in direct competition with all of these other ones that essentially become platforms for innovation. In my mind, Bitcoin is mostly used for store of value, store of wealth, and it's not used for innovation as such. It was the first blockchain. There are initiatives right now to be able to create smart contracts on on Bitcoin blockchain, but we will see if that comes to a success. It's still very early days. So I would say, look out for projects that create real innovation, make real difference. And those are always interesting because even if you get the investment wrong, you feel you're part of an interesting, innovative community, and you'll learn a lot from this. So that's my take out, I would say.
Of course, as we're recording this, we're in the midst of a bit of a sell-off out there in the broad crypto space, even if they have rebounded a little bit from the lows. Coming into earlier today, we had Bitcoin around the 40,000 level, ETH around 3,000 level. So obviously, yet another near-term sell-off here, Konstantin, in most of the major crypto assets. How has that impacted volume over there at CEX.io recently?
I think we're running steady. I'm not seeing a huge spike of volume. I'm not seeing a huge decline of volume either. I would say in general, December has been a pretty quiet month compared to how Decembers can be in crypto. I'm not sure if the audience knows this, but crypto historically has been very seasonal. And Q4 and beginning of Q1 of the year after, they usually are very aggressive in terms of volume. There's a lot of volatility, spikes up and down. There's movement. There's kind of a lot of exciting stuff going on. This year, there's been a bit of a spike. There's now a bit of a drop, but there's nothing too crazy to generate unreasonable amounts of volume. And equally so, there's enough movement for the market not to stagnate. So for us, it's quite a nice, comfortable place to be at, I would say.
Now, speaking of crazy volume and movements, this is, of course, our second episode of the year. So we've done recently a lot of looking back on the insane year that was 2021 with a lot of our guests. But of course, Konstantin, this is your first time joining us. So I'm curious for you. I'd like to get your and indeed the CEX.io perspective on the absolutely insane year for crypto and indeed Bitcoin last year. Remember, this time last year, the first week of January, Bitcoin had already broken through 30,000 and then to 40,000 and ran up ridiculous percentages just in the first month of the year. Of course, we saw a lot of turbulence throughout the rest of the year. A lot of people argue last year was really the year that Bitcoin and crypto reached the mainstream and just massive market saturation. So walk us through your perspective over the course of the insane last year, Konstantin, as we saw Bitcoin reach these insane new highs, get very volatile, come off them, rally again, and what kind of volume and uptake did you see on your platform throughout all of that?
Well, you're right. I think we had a very busy November and December, and what was interesting was not only not only Bitcoin and Ethereum were going up in price, but a lot of the other projects were going up in price as well. And what was driving it behind the scenes that people didn't realize, November and December, very few realized that, is the whole DeFi community, which pretty much didn't exist in December, January. And then by sort of mid-year, the DeFi community became this huge industry with, I can't remember now, but it was probably around over $10 billion worth of capital locked in DeFi. So we had a very interesting kind of scenario where you had the mainstream cryptos get traction, then the prices receded. But as that happened, a new generation of crypto projects generated out of nowhere the whole DeFi community, which generated massive passive returns through investing in liquidity pools. And that is an innovation that didn't happen previously. So it was a complete, I would say, step innovation, even within crypto. And that came kind of, these things have been simmering for a long time, but nobody believed they would accelerate so quickly, so fast, and in such, with such force. So because of that, we had also what normally would be a fairly quiet time around summertime. This year, summertime was actually crazy busy, and May was our record month, where we probably, in that month, I would guess we did something like 15 times the usual volume that we did in terms of trading. So that just shows, and then kind of the majority of trading, the majority of action didn't actually happen on the centralized exchanges. A lot of it happened on decentralized exchanges. So what we got is a spill-off from the craziness that was happening in DeFi at that time. And I think that's the interesting part, how this new innovation sprung up. You could somehow mirror it to the ICO boom in 2017 without the kind of the bad things that came out of the ICO. So DeFi was mostly positive with some hacks here and there, but it's very, very new innovative technology. So you kind of have to expect that there will be some sour moments as well as euphoria moments.
Now, of course, Konstantin, we do like to focus on the derivatives here. It's an interesting, if nascent, part of the growing crypto market out there. I'm curious for you over there at CEX.io. What are your thoughts on this nascent crypto derivative space? Is this an area you've been intrigued by? And there's many different forms, of course. There's perpetuals and futures and indeed options. Has any of this come across your radar over there at CEX.io, Konstantin?
Oh, it has multiple times. And we keep talking about launching our ability to trade derivatives on our exchange. That is definitely of interest to us, both for the professional traders and the institutional traders. For the retail, it's a bit challenging because of the volatility, as you may know, especially if you talk about options. I would say ordinary, unsophisticated investors, I would say that, well, even with futures and CFDs, that becomes very, very risky. And your position may get liquidated pretty quickly. So we see this as more of a professional / institutional instrument going forward. And because of that, we believe that we should seek the right the appropriate licensing and regulatory framework to be in place before we start offering those services. And that's probably the main holdup for us right now. I'd say the other reason why we've been cautious is because of the volatility. The derivatives, as I say, some derivatives make sense. Some derivatives are a little bit too expensive and the market is a little bit unready for it. So like with the crypto options, I think personally, that's my opinion, they're not very cost effective yet, or they're not as cost effective as they should be. And for the options to develop into a product that would be more utilized, the volumes in the market needs to grow, the volatility needs to dampen a little bit, and then probably in the next year or so, we should see a big increase in interest in those. One other aspect which I find is quite interesting and often overlooked is the ability to offer securities which are wrapped, or crypto which is wrapped around securities, which would allow essentially access to traditional institutional brokers to crypto portfolios and index funds and ETFs, ETNs, and the whole breadth of things that can come out of that. And I think we will see a lot of innovation with regards to that in the next year. There will be a lot more products offered within the traditional financial space which reflect the pricing in crypto.
Well, speaking of innovation and new products, we did see a bit of a watershed event, at least for the U.S. audience here towards the end of last year when we saw the launch of the ProShares BITO ETF. A lot of people were very excited here in the U.S. They were eagerly awaiting the launch of a Bitcoin ETF. This wasn't exactly what I think a lot of them had in mind, an ETF that was based off the big futures over there at CME, but it certainly resonated with a lot of people, and we saw a lot of volume on the underlying. I do believe it was the fastest ETF to 1 billion since I did believe the launch of GLD back in the day. So it had a lot of uptake. The options have been very active as well. Of course, a lot of people are still out there holding out hope for their hotly anticipated spot ETF here in the U.S. I'm curious for you, Konstantin, what were your thoughts on the launch of the BITO ETF and perhaps what we might see in that area of the marketplace coming in the near future?
Well, I think what happens is when, and this we've seen this with CME and with some of the other futures that were released within the crypto spaces, is the traditional finance tries to box crypto into what they're used to, and that approach has a lot of positives and goods around it. It makes it easier to get through the regulatory perimeter and all these things. However, usually that has a knock-on effect and the instrument doesn't operate as a true reflection of the crypto market. And I think this is what we're going to see happen in the near future, kind of the next generation of ETFs and ETNs and whatever the instruments would be, which will truly reflect how crypto operates. And the markets, the regulation and people's mindsets had to evolve over a couple of years for everybody to be ready for that. So I think this is going to be the year where it will become very, very easy, and I really hope that will be the case. It will become very, very easy to buy, I don't know, L1 blockchain index fund, which is linked to spot. That's what I would love to see.
Well, Konstantin, I appreciate you joining us here and bringing the CEX.io perspective to the crypto hot seat for the first time. But before we go, I'd like to leave them wanting more, Konstantin. So if you want to leave them with any interesting highlights or perhaps things they can look forward to coming down the pike from you and the team over there at CEX.io in the new year, the floor is yours, Konstantin.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, we have a lot lined up for the U.S. First of all, we're introducing a lot more digital assets to our exchange. So we're widening the service of the collection of services that we offer, digital assets that we offer. In addition to that, we have various offerings that we're working on, be it staking, savings, potentially cryptocurrency-backed loans. I have to be very careful to say that we're not overcommitting here, but at the same time, these are all the things that we're looking at, and they are operational outside of the US to some extent, depending on jurisdiction. So it's only logical that we bring across the good and working products that we already have to the US. And I think the other thing that I'd like to mention is one of the projects I've personally been working on is a crypto native debit card, which as part of our new way of accessing crypto via a product called CXL Wallet, which will be a very simple and seamless to use crypto native wallet, we would like to add the ability for our customers to request a debit card. So essentially, you would be able to pay with crypto, not just Bitcoin, with any crypto at a high street shop, venue, shopping mall, whatever it might be. And I think this would be, I'm very much excited about that because this would allow to bring in all of this breadth of services that we have to the real world when you go around to buy a cup of coffee, which is kind of linking the real world and the crypto world in one place.
Like I said, I appreciate you taking the time to join us here, Konstantin. And if any of our listeners want to check out what you folks have to offer, where should they go? What should they do, Konstantin?
Well, as you said, cex.io is the website. They can also follow me or Will Evans on LinkedIn. So my name is Konstantin ANISSIMOV, and if you search for cex.io on LinkedIn, Twitter, we're very present and active, and we're always posting some interesting things on social media. So whatever the channel your audience prefers, we're there. But our website is a good start.
It is nice when the URL is in the name of the firm, Konstantin. It does make it easier to send people to it. Where should I go for cex.io? It's very easy to find. Well, Konstantin, I appreciate you joining us today and beaming in from across the pond, and we'll look forward to seeing how all of your initiatives unfold in the U.S. in the coming months.
Thank you very much.
All right, listeners, now it is time to keep on rolling. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, let's get to it. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown. Man, there's a lot to break down out there on the show this week. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we had a little bit of dark side. I guess Uncle Mike, our compatriot over there on the option block, has succeeded in his ventures to talk crypto off the ledge because it has continued to sell off over the course of the last few weeks, even though it seems like it's rebounding off the lows today. We did break, ever so briefly, through the 40,000 level this morning, got down to about a little bit shy of 39,700. Of course, on our last show, Bitcoin was 46,000, almost 46,600. And we got as high on the 4th at about 47,500. So had quite the range on the week. And again, coming into start of today's show, almost 41,500. So having rebounded almost 2,000 points off the low of today. But we shall see how the day progresses. Of course, a little bit of downside, a little bit of action out there in Bitcoin means we've seen Bitcoin vol tick up just a little bit. It was about a 67 for your average at the money vol over there across the board on Bitcoin last week. This week, about a 69. It got up to the low 70s, about 72 at the height of the sell-off. So it wasn't like we saw a spike up into the triple digits or anything like that. By the way, these statistics and everything else we're going to talk about on the show here brought to you by our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. You can crunch these numbers for yourselves. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires out there. And again, if you're even remotely intrigued in this marketplace and you're listening to a show like this, so I have to assume that you are, then what are you doing? You got to go to a place like GVol. It's kind of one of the only games in town when it comes to the analytics that a lot of us are used to on traditional options markets that are really harder to find in the world of crypto. Things like SKEW and vol and OI changes and hot strikes and all these other cool stuff that, again, we take for granted in a name like a Tesla or a VIX or a SPY, but a little bit harder to find in the world of Bitcoin and ETH. And again, coming into today's show, we also saw the SKEW ticking a little bit more negative, which again shouldn't surprise anyone out there. Their average 30-20 skew, that's how the G-ball guys like to look at it. They take an average of all the options from the 30 delta down to the 20 delta, and they do it in both the call wing and the put wing and take a nice average of that. And it's down to about negative 4.3. That's down exactly 5 points. It was a positive 1.3 on our last show. So I've said it before, it takes a bit of a protracted sell-off to really get the puts kicking into high gear. And that's kind of what we've seen over the better part of the last week. So puts getting a little bit of love. If you're wondering what our friend Simon Ho, what his bit vol is telling us right now, it's a similar story, ticking up a little bit from last week. Last week it was a little bit shy of 73, about a 72.94. Coming into today's show, about a 74.71. Of course, bit vol is, the analogy is essentially the Bitcoin VIX. It's about your rolling 30-day implied vol measure for Bitcoin. So telling a similar story to what we're seeing over there on Genesis. And Simon's Bit SKEW, his other new proprietary Bitcoin index, also ticking up a little bit, 91.6 on our last show, 94.1 today. That's, again, kind of getting along the lines of what you might see with your SKEW index with SIBO. As it gets higher, it gets more lofty. That's usually an indicator, a lot more put interest going on out there. Let's see what kind of interest we're seeing in the overall open interest. Remember, as we talked about on last week's show, the end of December was just, it annihilated the open interest on pretty much Bitcoin and ETH. It just took all the open interest across the board. Most of these products lost roughly half of their OI, and they're still struggling to make that back. And we're seeing that right now. The reduced levels gaining a little bit this week. The calls are at about 91,500 contracts open on Debit. That's up about 1,500, but again, a pale shadow of what it was just a couple of weeks ago. The puts starting to get some love. All you who've been asking, what does it take to get the puts some love? This is what it takes. Some sell-offs, some protracted sell-offs, the better part of a week, including breaking through some psychological levels like 40,000. That happens, you see the puts start to kick into higher gear, and that's what we saw this past week. The puts are up to about 47,300. That brings you up about exactly 7,300. We're at about exactly 40,000 at this time last week. Remember, we saw DEES go off the board, took over 100,000 contracts with it. The rest of the months are struggling to make that back. January is now in the driver's seat with about 41,700 contracts open. It's up about 7,700 from this time last week. March number 2 with about 35,000 contracts open. It's up about 4,100. Again, you can add those both together and probably throw in a couple of more months. You still don't get to even the level that December was just a couple of weeks ago. So still a lot more OI to come back on the board. But it's interesting to see now they're at these lower levels too, where that OI is going to start popping up. We saw big changes on our top options positions for Bitcoin last week. Let's see if we see something similar this week. Last week, we saw the 50,000 strike leap to the top spot, the biggest open position in Bitcoin options on Debit. And it remains there this week. It didn't really change much. It's about 9,100 contracts open for the top spot. It's only down about 100. So the 50,000 strike still holding the top of the top 5, at least for now, even though it's a close race. Number 2, right behind it, the 70,000 strike with about exactly 9,000 contracts. So that's up about 100. So another 100 contracts in either direction for both of these strikes. And we could see a flipping of the top spot there. Number 3 is the 40,000 strike, also pretty close, 8,800 contracts open there. That's only up a few hundred this week as well. Interesting. The top 3 spots, they're very fluid. They could change right now as we speak. And then number 4, we have the par strike. So back up to the, shall we say, more optimistic strikes. That has 8,600 contracts, up about 300 from this time last week. So again, the top 4 really are all very close, neck and neck. And then we get to the bottom of the top 5, the 60,000 strike. That has only 6,800 contracts open. That's new to the top 5. So it is a bit of a contentious race for the top spot, the 50,000 strike, managing to hold onto it by the skin of its teeth this week. Be interesting to see if that continues to be the case, or maybe if we hang out around 40,000, maybe break through it again next week. If the 40K strike, or even, dare I say it, something lower, pops into the top 5. Certainly not seeing the 200,000 and the 150s and all the other crazy stuff we used to see in the Bitcoin land not too long ago. Speaking of everything changing out there and all things Bitcoin options, again, the value of that open interest, pretty much the same as it was last week. People, again, I'm not a huge fan of notional numbers, but it's the lingua franca of crypto, even though we're starting to fight back against it on shows like this and trying to get more contract volumes out there instead. Maybe we can change the narrative a little bit. For right now, that value, that OI over there on Debit, still around 6 billion. It was 6 billion last week as well. So not a huge change out there, even though we did see some decent volume days this past week. The 7th was the biggest day across the board, nearly $1 billion worth of notional volume changing hands. And on the 5th, we saw about 900 million. So a couple of pretty active days out there over the course of the past week. Decent activity over there on the CME front as well. We saw 90 contracts on the options front going up on Friday. Doesn't sound like a lot, but for a product that could do 2 contracts in a day sometimes, 90 is a lot. So getting up there, even though the OI of all the products at CME kind of fell off the board over the course of the past couple of weeks. Obviously, this OI on the options is down 600. That's a lot, to 1330 out there this week. So see if they can replace that here in the new year. Futures, same deal. OI coming off not quite as substantially as the options did, only down about 800 contracts. So the OI is about 11,200 right now at CME. Still pretty light, but it's not coming off as aggressively as we saw on the options front. Again, only 10,000 contracts on the future side going up on Friday. So kind of a light end to the week there. The micro Bitcoin futures, though, interesting story here. The OI is down quite a bit there, 15,000 to about 26,800. But we saw a lot of volume going up on Friday to maybe try to replace that. Almost 26,000 going up on Friday again. So these micro Bitcoin futures, the micro products in general, are just exploding over there at CME. And it seems like a lot of you out there, more and more of you every week, are starting to discover these smaller, more bite-sized contracts. Let's see what else you've been discovering as we head on into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let us begin our journey out into the altcoin universe. Let's start with the top 10 here, as we are wont to do. Number 10 this week is Polkadot at about 23 billion, almost exactly worth of market cap. Again, you know the standard disclaimer. Take all these market caps with a tasty, a delicious grain of salt, perhaps a big, massive tablespoon of salt. Number 9, we have good old Luna popping back in, aka Terra, there in the top 10 at number 9, 24.7 billion or so out there. Number 8, XRP, 34.5 billion. Number 7, it's Cardano. Back to the dark side. Most of these are back to the dark side this week, listeners. At about 37.5 billion. Number 6, it's Solana. Proof that Solana can sell off. Back down to 134. It's at 41.6 billion right now. Number 5, good old USD coin, 43.75 billion. Number 4, we've got BNB. Interesting. Our old friends Binance coin over there at about 69.9, almost 70 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, 78.3 billion. You know what number 2 and number 1 are. Number 2 is ETH, 362 billion. Number 1, Bitcoin, back down to the 700B handle, 785 to be precise. Again, a far cry from the old 1T level it was at not too long ago. And coming into the start of the show, we had ETH just fighting to make its way back over the 3,000 level. Last show, it was 37.56, so it sold off quite a bit. It's down substantially, over 700 handles from our show last week. And in between, just like we saw with Bitcoin breaking the 40,000 level, we saw ETH break the psychologically significant 3,000 level, got down to about 29.30 this morning, actually. So rebounding off those levels, but be interesting to watch. Same story on the vol front as well. We're seeing the vol start to tick up a little bit out there. It was a 75 on our last show this week, about an 82. Again, vol's not exploding, but it is starting to get a little bit frothier. Same story with the SKEW as well. It was about a positive 1.5 on last week's show. This week, negative 6.7. So the SKEW got decidedly more negative in ETH than it did in Bitcoin, which is kind of interesting. Let's get out to the OI now. Again, we saw the same story with ETH that we did with Bitcoin from an options open interest perspective. A whole bunch of the OI fell off a cliff at the end of December, still struggling to make that back. Even though getting a good clip of that back this week, the calls up 150,000 contracts to about 1.15 million on Debit. The puts up 85,000 contracts to 358,000. The puts needed it because they were dramatically below the calls. Now getting a little bit closer, still not even 2 to 1. The calls are at 1.15 million. The puts only 358,000. Still have a ways to go, but intriguing nonetheless. Let's get on out to the open interest out there. Same deal as with Bitcoin. It's a similar value. We have about 5 billion worth of the notional value of ETH OI out there, which is kind of interesting if you break down the numbers for Bitcoin. Bitcoin notional value of their OI on Debit now about 6 billion, and ETH getting up there, getting to 5 billion. Everyone who's obsessed with the flippening when ETH will surpass Bitcoin from a market cap perspective. Not quite there yet, but from a OI on Debit perspective, they are in a much more similar conversational range. In terms of volume, like I said, I like to talk contracts whenever possible. So I'm going to start mixing that into the conversation, I think, more here as we can maybe start to turn the tide of the conversation in the crypto landscape. And the busiest day for ETH was the same thing we saw for Bitcoin, the teeth of the sell-off, not just today, but also last week, the 7th, with 244,000 contracts going up on Debit. That's, of course, just the straight up non-block contracts. If you add up all the blocks, that's another 87,000 contracts. That was a pretty active day. If you look at it from a notional perspective, it's about 1 billion worth of notional volume going up on the 7th. So a pretty active day out there last week. Remains to be seen what today's numbers are. Once we start breaking those psychological levels to the downside, that usually equates to a lot of volume. Looking at the months out there, how you folks are lining up from a monthly expiration perspective here. In ETH, again, DECE went the way of the dodo, took a ton of OI with it. March is looking pretty firm, though, at 479,000. It's up 59,000 contracts this week. So once again, the quarterlies are leading the dance. January looking a respectable 281,000. That's new to our top three this week. And June bringing up the rear at 265,000. That's up 38,000 contracts from this time last week. In terms of where the size positions are in Bitcoin options, number one, unlike Bitcoin, which we saw, shall we say, a more relevant strike start moving in, it's still the 15,000 strike in ETH, which dominates the top five. There's 107,000 contracts open there. It's up about 2,000 this week. Then we fall off about 10,000 contracts to number two, which is the 3,000 strike. So we are starting to get more relevant strikes in there. 97,000 contracts open on the 3,000 strike. That's a newcomer to our top five this week. Number three, back to the optimism, the 10,000 strike with 95,000 contracts open. That's down about 3,000 from this time last week. Number four, the 6,000 strike with about 92,000 contracts open. That's up a whopping 22,000 contracts from this time last week. So some folks were coming to play this week on the 6,000 strike in ETH, which is interesting. And number five is the exceedingly optimistic 20,000 strike that has 91,000 contracts open, up about 3,000 from this time last week. So a lot of interesting strikes percolating into the top five there. Will the 3,000 strike, will it manage to unseat the 15K strike for the number one spot out there? We shall see. And again, what's up with all these 6,000 strike call options trading out there? We'll have to dig into that a little bit more for the show next week, see what's going on out there. What are you folks up to? What are your strikes of choice out there in the ETH options realm? Hit us up. Let us know as we move on out to the CME side. The CME's been making some moves in ETH of late. They still have the big dog, which is the traditional size multiplier of the ETH futures. That OI is drifting down to about 4,100, just only down about 100 from this time last week. And in terms of the volume on the futures, actually decent volume on Friday, about 5,700, which again, with the OI is only 4,100, 5,700 is a decent clip. It's where the micros, that's where the action has been. Again, these just launched a little over a month ago. If you're new to this, check out the episode we did of TWIFO This Week in Futures Options, where we had Tim McCourt from CME on the network to discuss all things ETH while they're launching a micro, all that fun. Again, they've launched on December 6th. That OI is ticking up pretty strong. It's up to about 25,500 now. It's up about 3,200 just over the course of the past week. And that's not enough. Nearly 33,000 micro ETH contracts traded on CME on Friday, which from a pure contract perspective makes it the number one crypto product over there at CME. That outpaces even the micro Bitcoin futures, which did about 25,000, almost 26,000 on Friday. So we are definitely starting to see more interest on the micro ETH front. Have you guys tried this out yet? Hit us up. Let us know. I'm curious your perspective. It's definitely the micro products are far more reasonable, far more attractively sized for, I think, a lot of the listeners of this program. It's clear with the traditional futures, they were going for the institutional and the ETF crowd, and it worked. They got the BITO product launched out there, but for the retail, the micro is the place to go. Everything else pretty much on the main altcoin universe rundown, listeners, is looking a lot lighter this week than it was last week. XRP down over a dime. It was 83.7 cents last week, 72.5%. This week, a little over 11 cents to the dark side. A Doge taking another hit. It was nearly 17 cents on the show last week, 14.3 cents coming into this week's show. Litecoin, 148.66 last week, 125.81, down nearly 23 handles over the course of the past week. Cardano taking it on the chin again this week. 134 on the show last week, 112 this week, down 22 cents. Polkadot, $30.30 last week, 23.41 this week, down nearly $7, about $6.90 or so. Solana, again, a name that has a hard time selling off, sold off pretty hard this week. It was 170.5 on our show last week, 133.87 coming into the start of today's show. Puts it off 36.64 from this time last week. And our old friend Shiba dropping, I know some of our listeners will be sad to hear this, dropping down from a 0.000033 to a 0.000027 over the course of this past week. And before we get out of here, let's dive quickly into some of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
Welcome to the Crypto Questions listeners, a portion of the show where you guys take the reins with your questions, your comments. We got a little bit of time here, so let's dive into this one here from JJ. He's touching on what I was just talking about earlier in the episode. JJ wants to know, why do people quote so much notional volume in crypto? That's not the case with most options products that are all about total contracts. Yes, I agree. I completely agree. This has been a hill that I've been fighting on since we started talking about crypto many, many years ago here on the network now. And I think a lot of that, JJ and everyone else who's asked this question, is crypto still very much a nascent market. So if you're trying to sell a nascent market to new entrants, to new players, institutional, retail, what have you, you go with the more impressive number. So if you have a product that's only doing a few hundred or a few thousand contracts a day, that isn't that impressive. That isn't going to get a big fund manager or maybe an active retail player to really sit up and take notice. So you throw around a number, that's the biggest you got. And in this case, they started throwing around the notional value of what they were trading because it looks and sounds much more impressive. Much more impressive to say 6 billion worth of notional OI versus, maybe a few thousand or 100,000 contracts there instead. So I think that was clearly the impetus behind it in the early days. But now crypto has graduated. Crypto has grown up. It is becoming much more liquid, much more official marketplace. I mean, as we just said with our guest earlier today, crypto very much hit the mainstream. If it didn't happen in 2021, I don't know when it happened out there, because this was last year really was the year that so many people really seemed to sit up and take notice about all things Bitcoin. People pulling me aside at all sorts of different things and events who have no touchstones or real overlay or insight into crypto markets at all, telling me they're buying Bitcoin or whatever the altcoin of choice it was. It's on their radar. So it definitely was an intriguing time from an overall market saturation perspective. So I think the time is nigh, JJ and everyone else who's asking this kind of thing, to start switching to a more standard unit of metric, which is contracts. So we're endeavoring to do that more. Again, sometimes it was a little bit opaque in the crypto space as well in terms of really being able to source this data. Thankfully, the folks over there at Genesis Vol have a good handle on this stuff, so we can leverage that platform and get into a lot more contract specs for you guys. So that's really what interests me, the contract numbers, the raw data, not the notional value of whatever. So we've indulged the crypto space for a long time here on the show, but I think the days of those indulgences are coming to an end. It's time to talk real hard data. And the crypto space, I think, is ready for it. So I think it'll be an interesting one. Great question, JJ. And if you have questions for us, you know where to find us at Options on most of the major social media platforms. Questions at theoptionsinsider.com also works. And if you're in the secret club, of course, head on over to the live chat and get your questions in. All right, everybody, that music means we've come to the end of another epic foray through the world of all things crypto. I want to thank our guest, Konstantin ANISSIMOV from CEX.io. Again, it's refreshing when the URL is the name of the company. It makes it easy to find. CEX.io is the place to go to check out all the initiatives that he was talking about there. And again, there are a lot of crypto venues out there these days competing for your crypto dollar. This one's been around for a while, and they have a decent track record of security. So if that's a concern to you, I know a lot of people, that's concern number one. It is your money, after all. You want to be secure in those choices. So CEX.io, an interesting one to check out. And of course, you know where to go to kick the tires and light the fires on all these analytics we talked about today and a lot more. GVOL.io is the place to go for all that. We've got to get on out of here, but don't worry, we'll be back again tomorrow for everybody in Secret Club Land with a great pro Q&A. Our old buddy, Mr. Nick Howard, I haven't talked to him in a while. He'll be back in the pro Q&A hot seat. He'll answer all your questions about crypto, anything futures and futures options. He's the guy to talk to, the analytics, the SKEW, the vol, all the changes, the highlights, the lowlights, how you guys should be structuring things, efficacy of strategies, all of these things, and a whole bunch more. If you're in the Secret Club, get those questions in now. Should be a fun one. If not, you know where to go. TheOptionInsider.com/Secret Club is the place to go to begin your journey to the dark side. And of course, we'll see you here throughout the rest of the week. A lot of great content here on the network, not just the crypto rundown, something hitting you pretty much every day, if not twice a day. And then, of course, we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll see you then.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.